So in the previous video we looked at how to do backstitch, which was this main star here. This video I wanted to talk a little bit about how you can embellish it. So we'll look at how to do this here, which is a whipped backstitch, I think it's called, and this one, which is a woven backstitch. It creates a rick-rack effect. I also wanted to talk about other options without embellishing it, by whipping the thread through. So you could use variegated thread, which is something like this, which means that the colour changes throughout the thread, and just by doing a normal backstitch you're kind of letting the thread do the decorating work for you, because it changes colour as you go. This one I used multiple threads and spaced them distance apart to kind of give a different 3D popping effect. And this one I used a different weighted thread, so this is Valdani, I think you called it, which is really, really nice, but it's a really thin thread and you can't split it in the way you can with 6-stranded thread. And I did 2 rows, let's see if I can get it in focus, so I did 2 rows of the back stitch on this star, but I did them literally side by side so that it'd look like it's got a thicker edge to it. There you go, so it looks like it's got a thicker edge. And then there are these options where you can add further stitches to it, have a play and see what you come up with. So let's look at how to do this one first. Okay, so I've already done the back stitch here to create the star shape. I'm just going to show you how we can do a whipped back stitch. So I've got 2 strands of a 6-stranded cotton and put it through the needle, and I tied 2 knots here at the end, like flat on there so you can see it. So I've got 2 knots at the end of the thread, and if you look at the intro to backstitch, then it'll show you how I did that. But I'm just going to show you how you can kind of decorate an already existing backstitch. So I've got all the backstitches done. I'm now going to come through from the back of my work, and I'm going to come through just at the top of the star here and pull it all the way through, and then because you've got a knot at your thread, the end of your thread, it'll stop it coming through. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass it under the back stitch. So I'm just passing it through. I'm not going through the fabric and I'm not catching anything else. I'm just going under that one stitch, and you just keep doing that. So you just keep going. So I'm going from the inside out each time. And I think it doesn't matter whether you go from the outside in, just make sure you do it the same way each time. And you just keep, I'll just move that bit out the way, and you're just kind of literally whipping the thread through the stitch, and then it whips over. So it's kind of like a, I don't know, a woven whip stitch in one, I guess. And you can create this really, really nice, it's almost like a plaited sort of effect. So I'll just keep going round. So just whichever way you do it, just pass it under the stitch each time. And if you find that the point of your needle is catching on the fabric, then you can use the blunt end of your needle, and then it shouldn't catch the fabric and it should just slide under the stitch. So you just want to make sure you're not catching the fabric and not catching the thread of the stitch. And I'll just show you what to do when I get to the corner, which is pretty much just carry on, to be honest. So whether you're doing it in a round shape or an angled shape, or whether you're doing it works really nicely when you're embroidering words. And you don't, I've done it in a contrast thread so you can see it, but it doesn't have to be a contrast. So I've now gone under that stitch and I'm at a corner, and I literally just carry on. So just keep going through. If I show it to you on paper, just in case that's slightly easier to follow, or just a different way of following it. So you've done your back stitch, and I've done it in a straight line just so you can see it. So this is, I'm going to use a contrasting colour, but you can do it in the same thread as before or a different thread. So you'd come from the back of your work through here to the front of your work. You then pass the thread under that back stitch until it comes out this side, and then you bring it round, pass it under there, bring it round, pass it under. So you can see that I'm doing the same direction each time, that I'm going under the back stitch, then passing it over, under, and it just creates this really nice sort of plaited effect, and it looks, whether you use a contrast or the same, works really well. So if you're finishing off, you'd go under that last stitch, you'd come around here, and then you'd put your needle down through to the back of your work and show you that bit back on the fabric. Okay, so I've got one stitch left to pass the needle under, and you can see here that I just had to be careful not to catch any of the other stitches, so I'm just going to use the blunt end. And you go, whatever your last back stitch is, you go under in the way you have all the way around the star, and then take your needle back. If you're doing a shape that lines up like this, then I would take my needle back down exactly the point that I started. If you're doing a shape that didn't need to meet, like the letter C, then obviously don't worry too much about it matching up, but just on your last stitch you want to go under your last back stitch and then take it down right at the end of the back stitch, and then you just tie a knot on the back. And the other option I wanted to look at is when you weave the thread in and out. So whereas on this one we did we passed the needle under the stitch and then whipped it over, this one you pass it under and then pass it back in. So I'll make more sense if I show it. So again, I've got a two-stranded bit of cotton with a knot on the end, and I've threaded it up. So I'm just going to come through from the back of my work right at the point that I want to start. So I'm coming in just here at the top. I'm then going to pass my needle in the same way that we did before. I'm going to pass it from the inside of the shape to the outside of the shape and pull it through. And now I'm going to pass it back from the outside of the shape through to the inside. I'm just going to angle the needle down slightly. I'll move this down so you can see it. Just angle the needle down slightly so I don't catch the other stitches. And then put it through. And you can leave it as a bigger loop if you wanted. You might need to put like a small stitch just here to hold the loop into place. And then that would create a really nice kind of big woven effect. I'm going to pull mine tighter because I want it more subtle, and then I'm going to pass it back from the inside to the outside. So you just keep this process of going inside out, outside in. And again, you can use the blunt end of the needle if you find that you're catching, because you're not going through the fabric and you don't want to split the stitch that you're going under either. So it's a really slow process again, and it can be really calming because it's that repetitive rhythmic process, says she as she catches her thread. And it looks really nice. You can do it in variegated thread, or you can use a different weighted thread. So you could use a linen thread or a wool thread, and it just creates kind of that contrast then between the two stitches. So I just want to show you this bit when I get to a corner of what I'm going to do. So I passed it from the inside out, and I know I'm using two hands, but some people find it easier with one hand, some find it easier with two, so it's just finding what works for you. And I'm just going to check the line as flat as I want them to be, and you can see this sort of subtle curved shape here. So I've now gone from the inside out, and although we're changing direction, I'm just going to carry on following that process. And I'm now going to go from the outside back in and pass my needle through. And you just keep working your way around the star, and I'll show you it on paper as well. So we did this whipped stitch where we went under and then whipped the thread over. So this is your back stitch again. So you come out at this point and you go under, and then you go like this. So you're passing this contrasting thread under the back stitch each time, not through the fabric, just passing it under. But you start to go from in, out, out, in. And then when you get back to the start, or whether it's a straight line, then you can just pass your needle back through here and then tie a knot the back of the work. So I'll show you that bit on fabric as well. And then once you've done that stitch all the way around and you get back to the start, if you've got a shape that joins up, that is. So I've got one last back stitch to go through, so I've just gone under this one, so I need to go from the outside in, then this one you have to make sure you don't catch any other threads. And you see it creates this really nice sort of woven, I'm not sure if that's right, it's like a rickrack sort of ribbon effect through it. I'm just going to put it until it's got a little loop. I don't want to put it too much so it loses it. And then once it's done that, I'm then just going to take the needle down back through that first hole that I started in, and I'm going to hold this stitch into place whilst I put my needle through. So because I've left a little bit of a loop each time, if I pulled it too tight now, then, sorry, all the cat hairs everywhere, if I pulled it too tight now, then it'd pull those loops through. So once you've gone through to the back of your work, you can then just tie a knot, and you can see these two stars are the woven stars that we just did, the whip stitch and the woven stitch, but because you didn't go through the fabric it shouldn't show on the back at all. And then the idea with back stitch is that you can see the same design on the back of your work. So I've gone through, I'm taking care not to pull it too tight because I don't want to pull out that loop that I've created. I made a loop with the thread and passed the needle through, and I just put my finger in place to hold it so the needle will lie, so the knot will lie flat on the fabric. And I just do it once, and I'll do it a second time. Make sure it's flat against there. And actually I don't think that's lying flat there. And then when you're done, you can trim your thread, not too close, and you have, take that needle out, and then you've created your decorated back stitch. So we did the weaving in and out, and we did the whip stitch, and then we also talked about doing multiple layers using variegated thread and multiple layers but side by side. So have a play and see which one you enjoy doing, see what you come up with.